going to just start with a really simple understanding of burnout, and obviously just go through the definition and the understanding globally of what burnout is. So I'm just going to share my screen to get us started. So I'm just going to start everyone off with these questions. See if you can relate. If you're answering these sort of questions with a yes, then it's pretty important to take a little pause and have a think about maybe why. Are you exhausted? Are you at the point where you're unable to feel for others? That's around, you're in a situation where you're trying to look after someone else, whether it be in your family, whether it be through your work, if you're in a profession of care, medical or education or otherwise, and you've just got to that point where you actually have to dig deep to find that empathy that used to come naturally. Are you finding it hard to concentrate and actually achieve? And the thing about burnout is some people do tend to throw the word around as if it's a fairly loose terminology. Oh, I feel burnt out. It's the same with any of these kind of conditions, I guess. Oh, I feel depressed, and it's really just someone saying they're feeling particularly sad. But there are actual definitions around this, and there are agreed definitions through psychiatry and psychology and even the World Health Organization. And in answering these questions with statements, the commonly and well-known global explanation for burnout comes down to three characteristics. So it's emotional exhaustion. It's that feeling of helplessness. It's not hopelessness. It's not that you feel I'm hopeless, life isn't worth living, and I'm just not going to keep going. It's more of, I feel a bit helpless. I don't quite know how to keep going today. I'm just emotionally exhausted. I can't even deal with anyone else because of how I feel. A lack of empathy is an interesting one. Rather than a lack of empathy, I like to sort of say it's potentially more a tone of feeling. So it might be that you feel empathy and you empathize with someone, but you're just so exhausted that you have lost any ability to be able to show it. So you're just going through the motions, and underneath there somewhere there is the empathy, but you've just lost the power to actually be able to dig deep enough to find it. And this often happens with people like us in a social enterprise scenario, people in a caring environment, people who are parents and workers in situations. The most highly acknowledged ones are obviously the medical profession, where it's just a never-ending caring environment. Vets are another work situation where it's coming up as a very high incidence of burnout, and this is seen because they're constantly caring for animals and for people. The clergy, teachers, anywhere where the expectation of care is also a part of your work scenario. And then reduced performance, because there's a clear inability to be able to concentrate for really long periods of time, to be able to focus on reading information or connecting with people over and over. So then the work starts to slip. So burnout is really around, it started to come into terminology around workplace issues. But what is acknowledged is, although this is a workplace type of definition, obviously life and work come together. So we're not just saying, well, it can only be, you're only burnt out because of a work scenario, and if we took the work scenario away, you'd be fine. Because our lives now are very much intermeshed, work and life. So burnout now is very much acknowledged as sitting as a person's overall sense of well-being. So that's the simple definition. If you follow a little bit more in depth around burnout in the psychiatry and psychology side of things, you'll find that there are people making amazing headroads into really understanding extra characteristics. And that's what I'd like to share with you now. And some of you may really relate more to some of these things. So there's an amazing guy in Australia called Gordon Parker. He's written hundreds and hundreds of papers around stress and anxiety and now burnout, and has just published a book on burnout. And I find his work quite fascinating. And they have come up with these 9 other factors, which is, you know, that anxiety or stress of not being able to cope, just the low mood, just that sort of, as I said at the beginning, that helplessness. It's like feeling like, oh, you wake up in the morning and you really feel like you don't want to get out of bed. You know you have to, and you will, but there's just that little bit of feeling of, I wish I didn't have to. And so consequently, because you're starting your day like that, the edge of irritability and anger is right there. So it won't take much before you feel like you're switching into those feelings. And of course, how annoying is it that when you're exhausted, emotionally exhausted and anxious and stressed, you can't sleep. And all you want to do is stay in bed and go to sleep. But when you go to bed, you can't sleep. And that insomnia then becomes a cycle of feeding into the other things. So a lot of people who are burnt out will say they feel absolutely exhausted, but when they go to bed, they can't sleep. The lack of concentration ties in with that third part of the World Health Organization definition. Unfortunately, people who get caught up sometimes in this burnout sort of phase feel like, I can only focus on what I need to do. And because of that, they tend to withdraw from their friends. So rather than reaching out and talking to people, which can be such a fantastic thing to do, they actually, unfortunately, tend to withdraw. So it's something that you can watch in others as well. If you fear that people are maybe heading into a scenario of burning out, and you watch them maybe withdraw as well, to step forward and actually ask them to talk and be there for them to talk. Because one of the key factors in anything like depression or burnout or grief or any of these anxiety type syndromes is not to be alone. And of course, many of us are literally alone. Like, I'm literally physically alone in my house right now, and it would be easy to just feel completely lost and lonely. But we have technology, and I think, you know, it's really important. I know we don't have touch and feel, but we can still talk with people and get the benefit through technology. And then, of course, along with all of this comes that, oh, I've got a headache. You know, I've got headache, or I just can't deal with things. My body aches. And I have definitely had this situation where I felt achy and tired and headaches, and then I've gone to a doctor for the headache. I've gone to another doctor because I've hurt my back, and I've got gut issues, and I'm not eating well. So then I've gone to, you know, someone to talk to about that. And the issue can lie with, if you don't put some of these things together, there can be a misdiagnosis of the situation of burnout, because so few GPs or other health professionals will necessarily look at the whole picture. So sometimes it's really important for us to look at ourselves and to really understand ourselves. Is there more going on than just the backache? Because we tend to be very quick to go, oh, it's a physical symptom. Especially at my age, that's how we were brought up. A physical symptom is quite distinct to a mental situation. So if you've got a physical thing, you go to the doctor and you get the physical thing fixed. And now I think we're more savvy to understand that our stress and our mood can also affect our physical being. And it's really important, if you're sharing something with a health professional, to share the whole package. One of the major things is the perfectionism type personality. So it involves a tendency to set your standards so high that actually it's pretty hard to meet those goals that you've set for yourself. Perfectionists tend to catastrophize if everything isn't exactly the way they want it, the way they see it should be done. Or, and I can see some of you smiling broadly like, this is me, or this is someone I know. And I know personally someone on the call who does her to-do lists and probably gets terribly stressed when those to-do lists aren't ticked off at the end of the day. And the issue is around perfectionist types is fantastic personality, really hard people to counsel, brilliant people to employ, but they may head to burnout. So if you're employing a perfectionist for all their amazing skills, that's fantastic, but keep an eye on them because they set their own standards so high that often it's very difficult for them to be able to keep going, because in the end, it's really hard to get everything right all the time. And there are some ways of being able to reframe perfectionism, which is a way of reframing stress and burnout. So between Ella and I, that is something that we'd like to focus on, because this is a new way now of looking at burnout, and it's a really important side of it. So it's important, if you are a personality type that you know in your heart can be quite driven to perfectionism and you like things exact, to maybe reflect on your own behavior and work out what shifts you could make to make it easier on yourself. You can't change your personality type, but you can change some behaviors which will just alleviate that pressure that's on yourself. And before I pass on to Ella, I just want to go on to this, which I think is really important. I've got this slide here, not because you need to read all the words, but there's kind of a sliding scale, okay? You're kind of in the green zone, you're feeling great, you've got things together, life's okay. When you're surviving, that's when you know, well, I'm not thriving anymore, I'm kind of just surviving. You're just kind of heading into that, maybe the beginnings of burning out. And that yellow to orange is where we really like to catch people and say, if you can recognize this in yourself or in someone else, this is the area where you can actually self reflect and be able to use the skills that Ella's going to give you to maybe make some shifts and changes so that you don't land in crisis mode. Now, in looking at all of this, though, I want to make it really, really clear that we're talking about burnout today. We're not talking about depression or chronic depression, nor grief. But if you look at the definitions of those things, they're very closely related. And I think it's really important to just acknowledge this, because you may look through this list or think about someone in looking through this list and think, gosh, you know, I wonder if they're burnt out. And that person or you may actually be heading into depression. So it's really important to get a proper diagnosis. If you're in a crisis mode, it's really important to know why, because there will be different ways of dealing with where you're at. Burnout is, as I said earlier, it's helplessness, a feeling of helplessness rather than a feeling of hopelessness. As I was explaining to Ella the other day, it's when you feel, I can't get out of bed, but you do. Can I be bothered having a shower? I kind of know I have to, I will. And you get dressed and you put your makeup on and you get on with it. You're not excited about doing it, but you do it. If you are at the point that you are waking in the morning and you can't get out of bed and you genuinely don't get out of bed, you need to seek some professional help. It's really important. That is a different situation. That is likely to be depression, and you just need to get some help. Grief is really similar to burnout, but there'll be a key indicator as to why. You've lost someone, a relationship has finished, whatever it is, there will be a key point or situation that you can clearly identify, and you will move through the grief cycle. And some of the feelings that you have with burnout, you would also have with grief, but you will see a clear indicator. And, anger will come, and then, sadness will come, defiance will come, and there will be a clear stage throughout to the other side. So we're not talking about those things today, but I did want to highlight to you that there is an overlap in symptoms so that you don't get confused.